Brooke Baldwin here, and this is a tough one. One mother living in Georgia, she wrote this incredible piece on Salon.com this week, and part of it she writes this. A few nights ago, my 8-year-old woke up in the middle of the night screaming, "No, don't kill him. You're hurting my brother. Don't kill him." Who was her daughter afraid of? The police, specifically the SWAT team, whose raid left her baby brother. And this is a tough picture to show. Not this one, but we have others here. This is Boo Boo. This is the nickname after a raid by Cornelia Police and Habersham County deputies in Georgia on May 28th. His mother's article this week for Salon is called "A SWAT Team Blew a Hole in My 2-Year-Old Son." Here he is in the hospital. A flashbang grenade that officers threw landed in this baby's crib. They were looking for a drug suspect who was later found at a different location. Boo Boo has been in a medically induced coma, and just this week he was allowed to wake up and head to a new facility to recover. Obviously, it's a long road ahead, and not just for him, but his 3 sisters and the 2 people who now are sitting next to me. Baby Boo Boo's parents, Bounkham and Alecia Phonesavanh, and also here Marcus Coleman, the family spokesperson. So thank you all for taking a minute away from the hospital. I see, Alecia, you have the hospital bracelet, and Dad does too, because I imagine you're by his side a lot. So let me just begin with, for background for people watching, you all lived in Wisconsin. Your home burned down in Wisconsin, so you came to stay with a family friend here in Georgia. Take me back. It was the middle of the night. What happened?
Well, we were all sleeping. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And we heard a very loud noise, which woke us up. And then we heard more loud, like bangs and a bright light flash. And then everybody, myself, my husband, my kids, you know, we were just shocked. We didn't know what was going on. One of the officers came in and pinned my husband down and tore his rotator cuff in the process of having him pinned down. My girls were freaking out, and then I heard my son start screaming and crying. And when I went to go pick him up, another officer grabbed him first. And I kept asking that officer, you know, give me my son. He's scared. He's crying. Just let me have him. Give him to me. And when I went to grab him, the officer told me...
He stopped you?
Yes, he told me to shut up and go sit down.
So you couldn't even see what happened? So you were seeing smoke, and you saw this bang, and it literally landed in his crib.
Yep.
During that time, we didn't know yet, during that time, because they tried to hide him from us. And they pinned me down for a while, and I told him, you know, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe, and he still pinned me down, and it sounded like he asked somebody if he can let me up. The other guy said, no, not yet. So he still keep pinning me down, and I couldn't breathe. So I just turned my head, wiggled my head around, opened my mouth, try to breathe so I don't pass out, you know. And when they got me up, they have 2 officers standing blocking the view of the crib, and he walked me around the crib, took me outside.
All the while, what is the SWAT team saying to you as far as any kind of explanation as to why they're in the house?
Not yet during that time, until they came and one of them came and got me and untied me and cut off the zip tie, and then walked me out to the back room, and then he asked and tell me why he was here and stuff like that.
Why? Let me just get this in. This is a soundbite from the sheriff reacting to what they say happened.
There was no clothes, there was no toys, there was nothing to indicate that there was children present in the home. If there had been, then we would have done something different.
You're shaking your head. Why?
That picture that they just showed of the side of the house, you can clearly see the pack and play. Not even 2 feet from the door that they entered in at and threw that grenade in. It was clear.
Right,
you say it was clear that there were kids in the house.
Oh, right there.
That's pack and play.
It's right there in front of, next to the door.
As a mother, you're not allowed to even see what has happened to your 2-year-old. Right. Were you allowed to ride along in the ambulance at the hospital?
No, we had no idea of anything that had happened with our son. They kept telling us he's fine. He has not sustained any serious injury.
He was missing a tooth.
Yeah,
is what they
he
told
was
you.
missing a tooth. That's what they finally started telling us after we wanted an explanation. We wanted to know why there was blood on the concrete. My husband and I were there. We're not hurt. Our other girls are not hurt. Nobody else in the family got hurt. So where did that blood come from? Look at the playpen. What happened to our son? Why is there so much blood on the concrete?
Tell me about the moment that you realized where the blood came from. When did you first see your son?
When we got to Grady.
Right.
To the hospital?
Yes.
And what did you see?
I saw my baby boy laying there. His face is blew open. And his nose wasn't even attached to his face. It was horrifying. Nobody wants to see their little kid.
How is he doing now?
He's come a long way, but he's got a very long way to go. He has permanently lost his left nipple when the explosion happened. My husband has got to see the hole in his chest. I have not been able to.
I didn't want to look at it at first. Until 3 days back, when they changed the padding, I look at it, still open this bag.
You could see ribs.
Yep.
It was a hole in his chest. Jump in, Marcus.
I just want to make sure that we're clear here. I mean, any due diligence of good policing would have prevented the injuries of this young boy. Georgia has a dirty history when it comes to over-policing and not doing their due diligence. Whether it is Baugham Phonesavanh having his face literally blown open and his chest blown open on a botched drug raid, all in the name of the war on drugs. Whether it is Kendrick Johnson down in Valdosta with a botched investigation resulting in a murder mystery. I would just love to take this opportunity to send a message to Governor Deal and candidate Carter. I mean, we have a rare opportunity here in Georgia to set the tone across the nation, to implement some public policies that put morality and human life and good policing at the top of the list. There is so much over-policing sweeping across this nation. So thankful to the ACLU's completion of their report that statistically documents that as a fact. And we owe it to our children to live in a world where they're not in fear of people that are supposed to uphold and protect us from the law.
We are going to take a deeper dive on the other side of this break. There was an entire piece this morning in the Washington Post about SWAT teams. Listen, a lot of it is necessary because of hardened criminals, but at the same time, when you look at the situation, it just leaves you scratching your head. Before we go to break and before I thank you for joining me, have you gotten any kind of apology face-to-face from any of these SWAT? No.
Nothing. Nothing for our son, no card, no balloon, not a phone call, not anything.
I just see them making lies of us on the TV.
And laughing about it.
Let us know if anything more happens. We're going to stay on this, and thank you so much for just pouring out what happened here live on TV. I really appreciate it. And as I mentioned, we're going to talk about SWAT teams, and we'll talk to a former SWAT team leader about why they're necessary, but why others are saying they are militarized, and this has to stop. Stay here. All right, let's pick up where we left off, because you just heard how a SWAT raid in Georgia left a 2-year-old boy disfigured, and Baby Boo Boo's case is not alone. In fact, just this week, they mentioned the ACLU here, the American Civil Liberties Union, just came out with this report called The Excessive Militarization of American Policing, and found this. Here's just one statistic for you. Just under 80% of SWAT raids were to serve a search warrant, usually in drug cases. That means it wasn't for an active school shooting or a hostage situation, but most of the raids the ACLU looked at were focused on suspicion of a crime. Joining me now, Chris Gephardt, a 15-year police veteran and 3-time SWAT commander in Utah. Chris, thank you so much for coming on, because I want to hear your side of this. You listened to this family's horrible story. What's your reaction to that?
Thanks for having me. I wish it was under better circumstances. You know, what happened to Alecia and her baby should never happen anywhere in the United States, anywhere in the world. Not knowing the full investigation into what occurred, my initial gut reaction tells me there was a training issue. During training for deployment of a noise flash distraction device, otherwise known as a flashbang grenade, the officers are taught to look where they're going to deploy that device. Well, we can assume here that no officer wants to do damage, hurt, injure a child. Obviously, there's something wrong.
Listen, I understand there are hardened criminals, and I want them, like I'm sure they would want them, behind bars. But why, in so many of these instances, at least the ones that we keep seeing over and over in the headlines, are SWAT teams, resulting in unnecessary violence?
You know, there's a misconception that SWAT teams are used on drug warrants. The warrant for drugs is not what justifies the use of the team. There's extenuating circumstances, such as there are known to have weapons in the house. They're known to possess weapons. And the ACLU accurately points out in their report that over half the Americans have a firearm in their house. Mm-hmm. But I think SWAT teams need to start looking beyond that point and say, is the person prone to use that firearm in an offensive manner against law enforcement, or do they just have a firearm? I have a firearm in my house. Police officer comes to my house, I'm not going to use the firearm against them.
Mm-hmm. Just quickly, what are your rights? Like in this case, in this family, the SWAT team was looking for someone who didn't even live in that home. What are this family's rights? What are anyone's rights if a SWAT team comes banging in?
You know, and it's a very good question because it presents a scary environment. You want to defend your house, you want to defend your family. I know if I heard a bump in the night, I'd be grabbing for my firearm and trying to find out what is going on. Unfortunately, when it's the police officers coming in, we're supposed to be yelling and screaming, right? Police, 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 search warrant, search warrant, to let the homeowners know that this is a government intrusion that has been signed off on by a judge. But it's that split second of interaction between the homeowner and the police officer in a stairway, in a dark stairway, that decides the fate of either that officer or that homeowner.
Chris Gephardt, thank you so much for joining us. Just wanted to make sure we hear and we see both sides of the story. Thank you. We'll be back after this.